Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me again for another episode of Strathcona Stories, a fireside chat with the people and organizations that make up the fabric of this incredible community. Today, we're chatting with Alisha Masongsong, the Acting Director of Exchange Inner City. Alisha, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here today.
Fantastic. Well, I think we should start off with I wonder if you could take us through an overview of what Exchange Inner City is and the type of work the organization focuses on.
Definitely. So we're a very new organization. We've only been around for the last 4 years. We work right in the downtown East Side. And so Exchange Inner City is a community backbone organization focused on community economic development initiatives and policy here in the downtown East Side and broader inner city. We are a group of over 50 representatives, which includes stakeholders from like the nonprofit community, social enterprises, business improvement associations, even local residents and residents who have maybe had experience with poverty or are facing low incomes. And then we also have partnerships with some City of Vancouver staff as liaisons who are part of the City of Vancouver Arts, Culture, Community Services, and Social Policy and Planning teams. And so that's kind of who makes up our membership. And as a collective of stakeholders in the community, our main priorities are to increase income opportunities for people in the neighborhood. So low barrier employment opportunities, peer employment opportunities through social enterprise, et cetera. And we also want to increase access to affordable goods, services, and spaces in the inner city community. So being able to access local businesses for nonprofits and social enterprises or new local entrepreneurs to be able to access affordable leasing space and be able to build capacity and further develop their services. So that's kind of what we do in a higher level overview.
That's great. So a real wide range of services. And I first became aware of Exchange Inner City and we were introduced through a group of community-based organizations that now is called the Coordinated Community Response Network. And for me, this group has been vital. It's been a vital part of keeping me plugged into what's going on in the community and all of the work that's being done in collaboration since I think, and maybe you can touch on this, when was this group formed and what was its original mandate?
Yeah, definitely. So we've had the honor of being a part of this group. It was actually formed right at the beginning of the pandemic, early March. A number of social enterprises reached out to Steve Johnston, who's the executive director of an organization called Community Impact Real Estate Society, or called CERES for short. And so CERES brought social enterprises together to talk about, okay, this pandemic's going to hit. What are we going to do? Some of these social enterprise programs might have to be on pause or closed down. How do we pivot or, so that doesn't happen? Let's start preparing because we see this coming. And then once the state of emergency happened, CERES started to reach out to other folks in the inner city community and just said, join on. We've already started to have conversations about this and supporting each other. Like, everybody's welcome. Let's work together as a community. We're going to need to lean on each other for support in this time, just because we're all going through so much, but also through a lot of the same problems. And since CERES, a number of those social enterprises who came together at the beginning were a lot of Exchange Inner City members. They had reached out to me to join on early in the process, to be involved in this group. And then eventually the group got so big, word spread so fast, as it always does in the downtown East Side. And CERES had asked Exchange Inner City, because you're already a convening vehicle, you already have the networks, you're inviting a lot of your members to this group. Could you help us with communication to the community, share the information broadly, but also help us a little bit with some of the coordination efforts? And so of course, for Exchange Inner City and our relationships in community and the fact that we already had some of that social infrastructure in place, we were all on board to support CERES in this. And so what it allowed us to do is to have CERES be the voice to city and provincial government and bring community needs upward there to the government and ask for resources, funding, support, etc. And Exchange Inner City supported matching coordination needs at the community level and sharing information downward to the community and spreading that across broader networks that we were already tapped into. And so this group is, we were meeting 3 times a week on a call over Zoom, and managing everything from immediate relief efforts to now moving into recovery and continuity of local small businesses, nonprofits, and social enterprises, and helping a lot of the drop-in services and nonprofits think about reopening safely. But in the time of that immediate relief efforts, the group came together and did a lot of amazing, remarkable things as a community on our own. Just to name a few, we set up a PPE, so personal protective equipment supply hub. We were getting so many donations from private donors to give these supplies out to community nonprofits that we were able to have Atira take one of their spaces they weren't using, set it up as a donation hub, bring donations in from all these different groups across the city, and then be able to disperse them on a triage basis by need across nonprofits. We were able to have some new peer programs set up and a collaborative peer network developed to provide outreach services to people on the streets, keep them up to date around new government supports and informations and income supports coming through, deliver food to folks on the street because a number of the drop-in services that offered meals were closing down or had limited meal programs provided. And so delivering food through another sort of structure that was created, which was a food coalition led by Potluck Cafe Society and Have Cafe, 2 social enterprises who stepped up and prepared the food, distributed it, worked with unions to get the food delivered, worked with other small businesses to make more space for food preparation and use their food and keep their employees employed during this time to make these meals for the community. And that was able to provide within the first 60 days like 90,000 meals to folks in private single room occupancy hotels or private funded housing and people on the street. We've got health posters out there in both Chinese and English that weren't readily made available that talked about where you could get specific community information, cell phones given to folks, to peers, to be able to communicate with people, to people that never had phones before so they could stay in touch and not feel so isolated. So you name it, a number of these things were done by this coordinated community response network and everybody coming together. There was respite spaces open up specifically for women 24/7 to provide that needed drop-in space and security that normally was indoors, and then they brought it outside and created these tent spaces, and that offered employment to peers to support those spaces and have food and everything and still build community together. So there was a lot of wonderful work there.
Wow. Yeah, honestly, I think community hubs like this serve such an important purpose. And when I took on this position at the Community Policing Center in January, I was blown away by the sheer number of people and organizations that were doing so much work in the downtown East Side and in Strathcona that from the outside, if you're not in it, you might not have any idea that all of this stuff is going on to help people. And when we talk about community safety, which is what I'm all about, it's not, for me, it hasn't just been about preventing the spread of the virus, which has been a huge part of the work, I think, but it's also putting those safety nets and supports in place for all the people that live here, because making sure people have that and are able to bounce back and land on their feet and stay healthy and supported, I think just contributes massively to the safety of the entire community in general. So I love how this group has come together, and I wonder myself about the future of this group. Do you see there being, what's the evolution of this group in the short term and potentially the long term?
Yeah, definitely. So right now, the group is really coming together to think about what the long term looks like. So series is continuing to hold these meetings. Instead of us meeting as frequently 3 times a week, we're meeting once a week. And many people are still coming out. And what we're looking at more is moving into recovery and continuity of our nonprofit sector, the social enterprises, and the local businesses here in the inner city. Because a lot of the nonprofit and social enterprise are quite frankly at risk of having to close down programs entirely, or at risk of losing a lot of programs because funding is different now. There's fiscal pressure from everywhere that less funding is coming through to these nonprofits that they would normally rely on. And businesses have had to think differently about how they operate, or haven't operated so long that they're worried that they can reopen or not. So because Community Impact Real Estate Society is a social purpose real estate organization, and they had a blended portfolio of supporting both nonprofit social enterprises and local businesses, they're wanting to create a space for that support, and thinking about reopening, thinking about what they need as they reopen, and what the city and province need to do to make their lives easier to stay open long term, and to think about what did we learn from the pandemic, where were the gaps that we came across as a community, and sort of documenting those to show that to the city and to the province, so that if there's a second wave or another emergency, we have an idea of where things need to improve, where things need to be more streamlined and efficient, so that action on the ground can happen much more quicker and smoother. So we're definitely looking at those things right now too, as a group. So that's kind of what the group is focused on right now. And so we see there being some long-term work in preparing ourselves potentially for a second phase, but also sharing a report out about how important the nonprofit and social enterprise community is, and how resilient the inner city is, and really showcasing that to philanthropists and government for further support down the road.
Yeah, and it's definitely clear to me all of the work that gets done, it significantly just impacts the entire community and everyone that lives in Strathcona as well. And I think this sort of perfectly tails into what I wanted to ask you about next, and that's, I know Exchange Intercity does a lot of community economic development advocacy work, and I'm still pretty new to the neighborhood of Strathcona, but something that's pretty clear to me right away is that people that live in this neighborhood just absolutely love this community and are very supportive generally of local small businesses and social enterprises and everything like that. There is a lot of gentrification and brand new developments coming to Strathcona that are planned, or they're already underway, or are coming in the near future. And in a recent presentation to the city, I know that you called for the expansion and to refine the community benefit agreement policy for all new development projects. Now, I wonder if you could first explain quickly what a community benefit agreement policy is, and the changes that you're looking to the city of Vancouver to implement.
Yeah, for sure. So Exchange Intercity has been advocating for the community benefit agreement policy for the last 3 years now, and we were part of co-developing that policy with the city, and then it got passed in 2018, and now we've been involved along with Biosocial Canada in actually figuring out what the implementation process of that policy looks like in real life, and creating a toolkit, and thinking about advisory groups and secretariat services. So that gives you a little bit of context about why we're bringing this forward, because it was something that as a community we've seen needed for a long time now. And so we see this tool that the city already has, it's passed, it's available at their use, to be expanded to all developments. Because right now, the community benefit agreement only applies to new development projects that are over 485,000 square feet. So very, very large development projects, which means if we think about Vancouver, there's not a lot of land space to develop that many large developments in this neighborhood, but we're having several condo towers go up, and other smaller developments happening all the time. And if we're in this period of thinking economic recovery, and development community is continuing to develop all of these condos, they're still going ahead with everything. thing, then we need to think about expanding that policy onto development projects that are smaller than 485,000 square feet, and think if we can do it on all development projects. But if not all, maybe it's a different threshold. Maybe it's from 100,000 square feet up to the current threshold of 485,000 square feet. And the reason why we want to expand that policy on these projects is because it allows for community to be involved in the negotiation and agreement process of what happens with that building, and how are those buildings including local employment opportunities, social employment opportunities, and local and social procurement opportunities. So currently the CBA stipulates that 10% of all hiring and 10% of all procurement throughout all phases of the development project need to go directly to first source hiring opportunities and to local and social procurement opportunities. And so first source hiring essentially means that jobs are given to local Vancouverites first. And then to think beyond that about providing jobs to equity-seeking groups. So people who may be newcomers to Canada, people who may have struggled with mental health and addictions in the past, recently coming out of prison, have experienced poverty, and just thinking anybody who may have had a barrier to employment, even sexual orientation, race, etc., that have created challenges in the past. Like, how can we ensure that employment opportunities through all phases of this development and in the operation of that development and its lifespan are available for local residents and equity seeking groups first? And then the other piece is about, when we think about buying all the goods, materials, supplies, services of constructing that building, but also even in the meetings before, when they think about design and how the CBA process will go, who's catering those meetings? Instead of it being a large corporate caterer, could it be a local social enterprise that caters those meetings? And then when the building's operating, who's doing the landscaping around the building? Who's providing the coffee inside? Who's occupying some of the retail spaces? How are those retail spaces being available? Are they affordable? Is there a mixed portfolio that can happen there? So these are things that the CBA considers and works with the community partners in doing and implementing on each project. So when you think about economic recovery, this is an opportunity for people who've been struggling the most and for our local community to access jobs. So if you've lost your job, it's maybe an opportunity to access free training to skill up and get a job, or reskill to a new job. On development projects, it's making sure the continuity of local, small, and diverse businesses, nonprofits, and social enterprises continue, because they'll have access to more contracts as more developments are created. So we have put this as a number one recommendation to the City of Vancouver, to say, use this tool that you already have, expand on it to help with recovery going forward. And it's a culture shift in how we work as a local community in general and as a city, and think about the economy differently.
Yeah, and I think our organizations are so aligned in that by doing all of these things, you're uplifting all the members of the community, and that just creates a stronger, more connected community overall, and just makes it a better and safer place for everyone that lives here. And I love the idea that the people that live here and work here and contribute here have an active say in what is going on economically, and they don't feel like it's just everything's changing all around them and they have no voice in how that looks or how that works. So I think that's great. Now, finally, I think one of the biggest topics of discussion for all the residents that I've talked to right now is of course the encampment that was at Oppenheimer Park and that moved to Crab Park and now has relocated over to Strathcona Park. I wonder if Exchange Intercity has any involvement at all, or has any thoughts on the homeless situation and the crisis that is going on with all the people that are living in this camp, and how you feel about the best way that the city can work with people to move forward.
Yeah, definitely. So normally Exchange Intercity, we're very, very focused on community economic development. But as demonstrated earlier in this conversation, we're also happy to support the community wherever it needs, and, provide added extra advocacy efforts and share messaging, and think differently, and hear out what the community needs, and support that where we can. And so we recognize that there's a lot of other organizations who specifically focus on housing and the needs for folks, supporting people on the street, raising income assistance rates, and things like this. And a lot of those groups have come together, created networks to support people in the encampments, and provide services. And exchanges behind adding support to that, and encouraging them to do the great work that they're doing. But when we think about the encampments, the biggest thing that we see putting that are important to put forward is that people are homeless. The shelters have had to limit the amount of beds that they can be made available than they normally would have during the pandemic, because they've had to spread everything out in order to ensure physical distancing. So that means shelters alone haven't been able to offer as much space as they normally would. And so more people are on the streets than would have been before. But also, shelter isn't the long-term answer here. The long-term answer is affordable housing. And everybody in this city, and especially in the downtown east side and inner city community, have always advocated for affordable housing. And that's housing that's at the income assistance affordability rate, the $375 a month that people get on income assistance towards housing. It doesn't mean affordable housing if you're making $80,000 a year income. It's about that rate being available. And so in order for people to leave these parks, there needs to be more housing opportunities. And so, yes, the province stepped up, bought out some hotels temporarily to have people shelter in hotels, and made sure that there was spaces in current BC housing buildings, and supportive housing buildings to offer space more rapidly to people, and to move them in. But there wasn't enough housing available for the amount of need. And so people are going to continue to live outdoors, and set up encampments in parks and create their own communities to support each other until there is enough housing available. And so we need the city, we need the province, we need the federal government, all three levels of government, to step up and provide more housing opportunities, even if in the short term it's more hotels in the meantime, until longer term housing buildings are built to meet that demand later. That's all great. But we can't keep moving people around from park to park and enforcing injunctions on them to not be able to stay here, and say that they can't do this, because where else are people going to go until that housing is provided? The other thing is, there's these networks of support. There's peers in that community, in that encampment, already doing a lot to create community, to provide safety to one another, support each other. And I think, if anything, if the city and the province doesn't have housing for people to move into right yet, at least provide funding to the peer support programs, to those encampments, to survive, to continue to build on community, to provide what they need, like things like firewood, or hire the peers to help with giving information and support services, or community organizations to provide wraparound health support services at these encampments in the meantime. But we just can't keep asking people to leave one park to the next, because they'll just go somewhere else until housing is available.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. And I know there is a lot of concern in the neighborhood about safety, not only for the people living around the camp, but the people living in the camp as well. And what I've noticed is, with this newest camp at Strathcona Park, there's been a lot more compassion and empathy seemingly from the community about those people. Now, I don't think anyone in the community, including the people in the camp, thinks that having this encampment in a public green space is the best long-term solution. And I don't know what that is either, but I think what's become clear, and I think this echoes a bit what you were saying, is people are looking for a long-term solution from all the levels of government, up from local to provincial and to national, to provide a more long-term solution, because yeah, like you said, this isn't the best long-term solution, and we need the supports to uplift them. Well, Alisha, I really want to thank you for doing this. I've personally learned a lot during our conversations together, and if people in Strathcona want to learn more about what Exchange Intercity does, or maybe even how to get involved themselves, so what can they do?
Yeah, definitely. And thanks again for having us. People are always welcome to be involved in Exchange Intercity's work. We meet every month, the last Monday of the month from 4 to 6. Right now, we're doing that all virtual by Zoom. So if people are interested, they can get in contact with me. You could hopefully share my contact information after this. And yeah, anyone is welcome. We focus a lot on community benefit agreements, as spoken about previously, also around social procurement, peer employment, and just building up the social enterprise, nonprofit community as part of the economy, and as part of that inclusive economy, and thinking differently about how we're all involved. So you can join those meetings. We also have smaller subcommittee meetings focused specifically on one on community benefit agreements called the Community Benefit Network, and it meets monthly. It's the every second Wednesday of the month from 3:30 to 5. And then we have a social procurement roundtable group that brings purchasers and suppliers together, builds relationships, looks at gaps, challenges, brainstorms new opportunities to create contracts and work together. And that happens every other month on the first Tuesday from 2:30 to 3:30. And again, all of this is by Zoom, but normally we would meet face-to-face in person in the community. And when we have a space to do that, we will let people know. But just reach out to me by email, phone, through Dan, and we'd be happy to have you involved.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And I definitely will include contact information, social media to Exchange Intercity, and a few of the other partners and organizations that we talked about on this video, and I'll include all that below the video. So once again, thanks for joining me, and thank you to all of you for joining us for this fireside chat. Bye, Alisha.
Great. Bye. Thank you.